we no longer get any errors for the types that we are sending here because they match exactly the prompts which we defined inside of the sidebar item. So make sure you are inside the sidebar item, and first thing I want to do is I want to remap this variable icon by using a colon and then using capital icon like this. So now I can use this immediately as a component inside of my return function. Great. So let's go ahead now and let's add a couple of hooks before we start working inside of styling, because we're gonna need some dynamic styling depending on whether this route is active or not. So const path name is equal to use path name, and you can import use path name from next navigation. So import use path name from next/navigation like this. Great. Besides the path name, we also need a router. So const router, use router from next/navigation. So whenever you import the router, make sure you didn't accidentally import it from router. So it's next/navigation in the newer versions. All right, now that we have those two, let's define our isActive function. So as you can see, my GitHub Copilot is giving me a very simple way that I can check whether the route is active by comparing the current path name with the href. But we're gonna need a bit more advanced function for that. So let's go and write const isActive to be equal, in parentheses, path name is equal to href. My apologies, path name is equal to just a slash, and if href is a slash, in that case, that is gonna enable the first route to be active. But we add a pipe, and then we write if path name is equal to href, and if path name question mark dot starts with open template literals and write an href and a slash, and there we go, we have our isActive finished. So why did we do this in such a complicated way? Well, first thing that we have to check is whether we are on the slash page, right? So just the root page. Then we have to check whether we are on another page like slash search. But we also have to check a specific case where we can be in a sub-route of a specific route. For example, we are going to have a slash teacher route, and inside of slash teacher, we're gonna have multiple other routes. So that wouldn't work with this version right here. So that's why we need three cases. One for a very simple check if we are on the root page, one for a very simple check if we are on the exact same page, and one just to check if it is the parent path of the specific page. Great. So it's a bit complicated, but it's gonna give a better user experience. Great. Now let's go ahead and let's write const onClick like this, and all it's gonna do is router.push the href to the URL. Great, and now we can finally develop our sidebar item. So I'm not going to use a div, I'm going to use a native HTML button element. And let's go ahead and let's add some props here. So onClick is going to be onClick, type is going to be the button, class name is going to be dynamic, so open curly brackets and write cn, and you can import cn from add/lib/utils, and you absolutely have this because shadcn init added it for you. Great, so now we have this cn imported from add/lib/utils, and let's go ahead now and let's give it the default classes first. So these are the classes that I'm going to write now are the default classes which are not dynamic, right? So let's write flex items-center gap-x-2 like this. We're also gonna have a text-slate-500. Text is going to be small like that. Font is going to be 500 weight. PL is going to be 6 like this. Transition is going to be all. Hover is going to be text-slate-600. Hover on the background is going to be slate 300/20 like that. And after we've written that, go outside of your annotations and add a comma. So these are the default classes, and now we're gonna go ahead and write the dynamic classes. So if we are active, in that case, we're gonna write text-sky-700 like this, bg-sky-200/20 like that, and hover is going to be bg-sky-200/20. So we don't want when the route is active and we hover on it in the sidebar, we don't want to change its colors. So that's why we are doing this. So another hover for the text. So text-sky-700 like that. Great. Now inside of this button, let's go ahead and let's create another div with the class name of flex, items-center, and gap-x-2, and padding on the top and bottom of 4. And inside, go ahead and render the icon. So make sure that you have this icon with the capital I, and we did that by remapping the prop icon right here. So now we are available to use the icon like this. So it's going to be a self-closing tag like this. Let's go ahead and let's give it a size of 22. Let's give it a class name of CN like this. The default is going to be text-slate-500. But if is active, in that case, it's going to be text-sky-700 like this. Great. Now let's go ahead and let's render the label below that like this. Great. And let me show you how this looks now. So as you can see, I have my dashboard now, which is selected because we are on the root page, right? If you try and click on this, it's going to throw you a 404 because we didn't create the search page yet. So one more thing I want to do is a small little bar here on the end to further indicate that this is selected. So let's just quickly do that as well. So after the label here and after this div, so just above ending the button, create a new div, which is actually going to be a self-closing div. So let's go ahead and write it like this. And I'm going to go ahead and write a class name, which is going to be CN again, like this. And let's give it ml-auto, opacity-0, border-2, border-sky-700, h-full, transition-all, like that. So those are the default classes. And now if it's active, we're just going to change the opacity to 100 like this. Great. So now if you see how the dashboard looks, there we go. You can see how it has a nice little bar here to further indicate that it is selected. Great. So now let's go ahead and let's just enable this route so it's not a 404 error. So I'm going to go ahead and close everything. And inside of my app folder, inside of the dashboard folder, inside of the routes, I'm just going to create a new folder called search like this. And inside, I'm going to create a new file, page.tsx. So let's just quickly add an SFC search page and a div. This is a search page like this. Great. And now let's test out our routes. So when I click here, there we go. You can see how now it works, and take a look at the URL. It is at /search. Now you might be wondering, where did the content go? We also had a little icon here to log out, and we also just wrote this text. This is a search page. Where is that content? Well, it's hidden behind the sidebar. So let's go ahead and let's resolve that now that we have semi-completed our sidebar here. So I'm going to go ahead inside of the app folder, inside of the dashboard, inside of the layout.tsx right here. And let's go ahead and let's wrap our children inside of a main element like this. And let's go ahead and give the main element a class name of mdpl-56. So we are going to push, so we're going to add padding to the left side by the amount of 56 on medium devices. That is because on medium devices, the sidebar is visible and its width is 56. So for that exact amount, we are going to push our content from the left. And let's also add an h-full like this. And now if you try, there we go. You can see this is a search page. And if you click on the dashboard, we have our little icon to log out from here. Perfect. So we have our sidebar now. What we have to do now is add our navigation bar. So let's go ahead and do that. So in order to add our navigation bar, we have to go back inside of our dashboard layout here. And just above this sidebar div right here, let's go ahead and add a new div. And let's give it a class name of h-open square brackets 80 pixels like this, medium pl-56 to move it away from the sidebar, fixed, inset-y, dash 0, w dash full, and z dash 50 like that. And inside, let's go ahead and render the navbar like this. And if we save, we're going to get an error. So let's go inside of our underscore components and create a new file, navbar.tsx like this. Great. Inside of that navbar, let's go ahead and let's export const navbar like this. And let's just return a div with the class name of p-4 border-bottom h-full flex items-center bg-white and shadow-sm like this. Let's go back inside of our layout, and now we can import that from /_components the same way we did with the sidebar, and save the file. And there we go. You can see that now I have a navbar and a sidebar here. And you can see that the navbar is visible on mobile mode as well. So this is where we are going to add a little button to open the drawer for the mobile sidebar. So let's go inside of our navbar now, and let's add that component. So mobile sidebar like this. And if I save, we are going to get an error. So now let's go ahead inside of our underscore components and create a new file, mobile-sidebar.tsx. Great. Let's go ahead now and let's import a menu from Lucid React like this. And let's export const mobile sidebar like this. So return, and let's go ahead and just return the menu like this. Go back inside of the navbar, and now you can import that from /mobile sidebar. And see how now I have a nice little menu here. Now let's go ahead and let's turn that into an actual button which opens a drawer. So in order to do that, we have to go inside of our terminal. I'm going to open a new one, and I'm going to write npx shadcn-ui at latest add sheet like this. So let me try and expand my screen a bit more if we can see it in one line. So like this, npx shadcn-ui latest add sheet like that. Press enter and confirm the installation like this. After it's done, we're gonna go ahead and close this terminal. So I'm just gonna close that one. Make sure your app is running. Great. And now we can go back inside of our mobile sidebar here, and let's go ahead and let's import sheet content, sheet trigger from add/components/ui/sheet like this. Great. And now we can wrap this entire thing in a sheet like this. And let's go ahead and wrap this in a sheet trigger like that. And let's give it some class name. So class name, this time it's going to be hidden on medium devices. So when the sidebar is visible, no need to show this menu. So on medium devices, hidden. Otherwise, PR is going to be 4 and hover is going to be opacity-75 and transition. Great. Now let's go ahead and let's add sheet content like this. And inside, let's render our sidebar from /sidebar like this. And let's just give some props to this sheet content. So side is going to be left like this. And class name is going to be p-0 and bg-white like that. Great. So if you go ahead and try now, so make sure that your sidebar is not visible. So collapse it like this. And when you click, there we go. Look at this, a beautiful mobile sidebar. Great. So now what I want to do is add our user button right here. So we are all gonna prepare that. So let's go back inside of our navbar. I'm gonna close everything, and below the mobile sidebar, add a new component, navbar routes like this. And we're not gonna create that inside of the underscore components because we are gonna reuse it for multiple navbars that we are going to have in our project. So let's go inside of components, not inside of the UI. So we're going to leave the UI for shadcn components. But for our custom components, let's create a new one inside of the components folder called navbar-routes.tsx like this, because we're going to reuse this navbar routes. Let's go ahead and let's mark this as use client. And let's export const navbar routes like this. And let's go ahead and let's very simply just return a div like this. And let's go ahead and give it a class name of flex gap-x-2 ml-auto. Whoops, I forgot to write class name. Like that. And let's just write the user button from @clerk_next.js like this. So this is going to make a bit more sense because later this navbar routes is going to have multiple items inside. So that's why I'm already preparing this gap here. So let's go back inside of the navbar, and now we can import the navbar routes from /components like this. So let's go ahead now, and there we go. You can see that now I have my icon to log out in the navbar, and it's also visible on mobile as well, and it's all the way here to the left. Great, so we finished the start of our layout. So what we're gonna do next is we're slowly gonna adapt this navbar and this sidebar to also handle views for the teacher view, right? Because the teacher is gonna have different sidebar items, and it's also gonna have different actions here in the navbar. And same is true when we are on a search page. We're gonna have a nice little search input here whenever we can query our courses. Great job so far. So now let's continue developing our layout. What we're going to do now is we're going to add a little button here next to the user button, which is going to say teacher mode. So when you press here, you're going to be able to create courses. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead inside of navbar routes right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a couple of hooks inside. So make sure you mark this as use client at the top. So we are inside of navbar routes, which are in our global components here. So not inside of underscore components, but right here. And let's go ahead and let's add the path name. So const path name is equal to use path name from next navigation. And we're also going to need a router. So const router is equal to use router like this. And make sure you import that from next/navigation as well. Great. Now let's go ahead and let's write const is teacher page like this to be path name question mark dot starts with teacher like this. Great. And now let's write const is player page to be path name dot includes chapter like this. And let's also add a question mark here just in case path name is not available. Great, so we have the is teacher page and is player page. So we're going to use these dynamic constants here to change our navigation bar, right? So if we are in the teacher view, we're going to have the exit button here, so we can go back to the student view. And what is the player page? Well, that is the individual course page, right? So when we click on a course, we're not going to have the normal sidebar. Instead, we're going to have a sidebar with chapters of that course. So that's why we say we're already preparing that for the navbar here. It's going to make more sense when we go and develop further. Great. So let's go ahead above this user button, and let's go ahead and let's write is teacher page or is player page like this. And let's go ahead and open a parenthesis, and let's add a button element, which we have inside of our UI. So let's go ahead and just add that. So import button from @/components/UI/button like this. So we added the button in the first part of the tutorial. And now that we have the button, let's go ahead and let's add the logout from Lucid React, which is a self-closing tag like this, and let's write exit like that. So make sure you import the logout from Lucid React. All right, and now let's give this logout a class name of h-4, w-4, and mr-2 like this. Great. And now let's add the alternative here. So again, open parenthesis, and this time open a link like that, next/link like this. Let's go ahead and let's add a button, which we have imported, and just write teacher mode like this. And let's give this an href of /teacher/courses like that. Great, so there we go. You can see how now I have this teacher mode right here. So let's go ahead and let's edit this a little bit. So I'm gonna give this teacher mode button a size of small and a variant of ghost like that. There we go. So now it looks a tad better. And now let's go ahead and you can already, no, you actually cannot click on this. If you click, you're gonna get a 404 because we haven't created this route yet. And let's just add the same thing, so size SM and variant to the button which holds the logout as well. All right, and now that we have that, oh, one more thing I forgot is in this user button, we have to add something. Otherwise our sign out is not gonna work properly. So we have to add after sign out URL to be a / like this. Otherwise, when you log out, you're gonna get redirected to the clerk website instead of our own. So just refresh and then you can test logging out. Great, and let me just separate these imports like that. Perfect, and now let's go ahead and let's just create a dummy teacher route so that I can show you the exit button from here, right? Because now if you click on the teacher mode, nothing happens. So let's go ahead and let me close everything here. I'm gonna go inside of the app folder here, inside of the dashboard, inside of routes, and create a new folder called teacher, like that. And inside, create another folder called courses, like this. And inside of courses, go ahead and create page.tsx like that. Let's go ahead and let's export courses page like this, courses page. So a very simple route. And now when you click on the teacher mode, you shouldn't get an error. Instead, you should have this little exit button right here. So you can see how different that looks now. And now we have an exit button. And when I click here, I should get redirected back, but I'm not. So we forgot to do that. Okay, let's go ahead. Let's go back inside of the navbar routes. So let me just find that inside of our components folder, navbar-routes. And let's do the same thing. So we can wrap this link around this button as well and make sure to close it at the end. And it's just going to redirect us to a / like this. And we actually don't need a router at all then. So you can remove that import and that hook. And let's try that now. So when I click on exit now, you can see that I'm back on the dashboard. But when I click on teacher mode, I am in a different screen. Great, so one more thing we have to do is when we are in the teacher mode, I want to show different routes in the sidebar here, right? So let's go ahead and let's do that now. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna go back inside of my sidebar. So let's go inside of the app folder, inside of dashboard, components, sidebar -routes right here. So we already have those routes which we hard coded to guest routes. What we're going to do now is we are going to add the routes for the teacher. So let's go ahead and just below this guest routes, let's write const teacher routes like this. And let's go ahead and copy this. And let's give this, instead of a layout, let's give it a list icon from Lucid React, and let's make this write courses like that, and give it an href of /teacher/courses like this. And for the compass, let's do a bar chart from Lucid React. Label is going to be analytics, and it's going to go to /teacher/analytics like that. So make sure you have bar chart and list imported from the Lucid React. And now let's go ahead and let's go inside of our sidebar routes and let's grab the path name. So const path name is equal to use path name from next/navigation. So just make sure you have this import. I'm going to move it to the top. All right. Now let's write const is teacher page to be path name !includes /teacher like that. Great. And now we can change this dynamically. So is teacher page, in that case, teacher routes, otherwise guest routes like this. Great. So let's see how that looks like. So right now I have the dashboard and the browse button, but if I click on teacher mode, I have courses and analytics. And of course we get a 404 here. So if you want to fix that, let's quickly go inside of our app folder, inside of dashboard, inside of routes, teacher, and let's just create the folder called analytics. I think I spelled that right. Page.tsx, sfc, analytics. So I did not spell it right. Okay, analytics. So let me just fix this like that. Great. So make sure you didn't misspell analytics, and make sure it matches the URL, and make sure it matches the sidebar routes for the teacher routes right here. So make sure the route is correct. The folder should be teacher and the inside folder should be analytics. So inside of the app folder right here, make sure you have teacher and analytics and page inside. Great. So now you can see how my sidebar is working here as well, and it should also be working on mobile. You can see that on mobile it automatically also switched to the teacher view, right? So only when we click on exit are we back on our dashboard and our search page. Great. So one more thing I want to do. So we push the content left, right, to be next to the sidebar, but now we forgot to push it from the navbar. So let's quickly go back inside of our layout page. So I'm gonna go ahead and close everything, and let's go ahead inside of the app folder and find the layout. Inside of the dashboard folder and find the layout. So inside of dashboard, layout right here. Let's go ahead and find the main element. So we push the content from left, and now let's also do the same thing from the top, right? And we're gonna push it for the amount of the height of the navbar, which is 80 pixels. So let's just write 80 pixels like this. And there we go. Now we can finally see our search page. We can see our dashboard page, which still has this little button, which we actually moved here to the top. You can see we have the courses page when I clicked on the little teacher icon, and we have the analytics page. Great job. So you completely finished this dynamic layout. And what we're gonna do next is we're slowly gonna go ahead and add some more features to this teacher mode so we can actually create some courses. So before we move on, one quick thing I want to do is I want to change my logo, because in the intro video I showed you a different logo and I did some color change on that. So I just want to show you how I do that. So I'm going to go back to logo Ipsum, and this is the logo that I'm actually using from my intro. So I'm just going to copy that, and I'm going to go back inside of my logo.svg file. So you don't have to do this if you're satisfied with your logo, but I just want to stay true to the intro that I showed you. So I'm going to go inside of the logo.svg right here, and I'm going to paste it and replace it right here. So let's see how that looks like now. You have to refresh the page. There we go. Now it looks much better, but we have to change the colors to match our dark color right here, right? So let's go ahead and do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and find the fill option, right? Like this. I'm going to click Command F or Control F. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change it to another color, and that's going to be 03. Whoops. So select this color, 2F, 234F, and then replace that with 0369A1 like this. And I'm going to click replace all like this. So if I save now, and if I refresh, there we go. Now we can see that my text has changed the color, but I still have to edit the icon. So let's go ahead and let's quickly find the color that we need here. So I'm just going to go ahead and find a different color here. I'm not sure which one is different. So I'm just searching through hashtags here. And there we go. It's the last one right here. So I'm going to make a search for it. So 7F57F1, and I'm going to replace it again. And there we go. Now if I try and refresh, there we go. Now you can see how it looks exactly like in the intro with which I've showed you. So where I want you to go now is I want you to go inside of teacher mode, and I want you to go inside of the courses page right here. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to add a simple button inside. So go inside of your app folder, inside of your dashboard, routes, teacher, courses, page.tsx right here. And instead of courses page, go ahead and add a button from add/components UI button and add new course like this. So for now, that's all it's going to do. And you can give it a little bit of P-6 padding like this. And let's go ahead and let's add a link from next/link like this. And let's give this link an href of /teacher/create like this. So now if you go ahead and click on this, it's going to lead you to a 404 page. So let's quickly go ahead and create this. So I'm going to go right here. Inside of my teacher folder, I'm going to create a new folder called create, like that. And go ahead and create a new file, page.psx, like this. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mark this as use client. And then I'm going to export the create page like this. Create page. Like that. And now if you save, there we go, you shouldn't have any errors now. So that's what we're gonna do. Once we click here, now we're gonna open the form to give a title for our course, and that's gonna create a draft course. And then users are gonna have to further add more information like an image, like the price, like the visibility and that stuff. So let's go ahead and let's create that form. So let's head inside of our terminal because we have to install a couple of ShadCN packages. So I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to write npx shadcn-ui at latest. And I'm going to go ahead and write add form like this. So this is going to add all of the form elements that we need. And that's also going to include a couple of packages like React Hook, Zod, and some others. Now let's go ahead and let's write npx shadcn-ui at latest add input like this, because we're also going to need an input which comes separately. After we are ready, we can go ahead and run dev again. Great. Now let's go back and make sure you're inside of your create page right here, and let's add some imports. So I'm going to go ahead and write import all as z from Zod like this. I'm going to import Axios from Axios. So I just reminded myself that we also have to install this package. So let's go back inside of the terminal and let's just write npm install Axios like this. And then let's run the app again. So now we have Axios. Great. Let's go ahead and let's import Zod resolver from @hookform/resolvers/Zod like this. Let's go ahead and let's import use form from React Hook form like that. And let's also add import use router from next/router because we are going to need it later. Now let's import all the form elements that we're going to need from ShadCN UI. So go ahead and import from add/components/UI/form like this. We're going to need form, form control, form description, form field, form label, and form message like this. Great. Now below that, let's also add the input and the button. So the button like this and the input in the same well. Like this. Great. So now we have everything we need and now we can create our form schema. So let's write const form schema to be z.object like this, which is going to have a title of z.string like this. A minimum length is 1, and let's add a custom message saying message title is required like this. Great. So now that we have the form schema, let's go ahead and create our form hook. So const form is equal to use form, which is going to use z.infer type of form schema like that. Let's go ahead and let's add the resolver to be Zod resolver, which uses the form schema which we just created, and the default values are going to be title, which is going to be empty by default like that. Great. Now let's extract the states from this form. So const, and let's extract is submitting and is valid from form.form state like this. Great. Now let's go ahead and let's write a very simple onSubmit function here. So const onSubmit. For now, it's just going to take the values, which is type of z.infer type of form schema like this. And let's just console log those values because we're not going to do anything further with them for now. Great. Now that we have that, let's go ahead and let's slowly start styling our form. So in this top div, let's go ahead and let's give it a class name of max-w-5xl. mx-auto. So what I'm doing with this class name is I'm limiting how wide this can go, because when you resize your screen, the elements get as wide as the screen. So I'm limiting it so that it can only go to 5 pixel width, right? And you can hover if you have the extension, and you're going to see exactly how much that is in pixels. And I'm using mx-auto to tell it that once it reaches this screen limit, and once it goes above it, just center the items by adding the equal padding from left and right. Sorry, the equal margin from left and right. Now let's also add a flex. MD is going to have items dash center, and MD is going to have justify dash center like this. H dash full and P dash 6 like this. Great. Let's go ahead and let's open another div inside, and let's add an H1 element inside of that div, which is going to say name your course like this. And let's give this a class name of text-2xl like that. And make sure to refresh your page so you're seeing the most up-to-date changes after you've shut down your app and installed some packages like this. Great. And below that, go ahead and add a paragraph and add something like, what would you like to name your course? Don't worry, like this. You can change this later. So something like this, it doesn't matter. And you can see that when I save this, it works, but I'm having an error here because I'm using this quote. So you can escape that by using apples, for example. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna replace the quote with apples. There we go. You can see how the syntax recognizes it, and it still looks the same. So in the text, you can see that it's still an apostrophe right here. Great. Now let's give this paragraph a class name of text-small like this, and text-slate-600 like that. There we go. So now it looks a tad better. Perfect. Now below this paragraph, let's go ahead and let's add our form element, which we imported. So form like this. And what we have to do is we have to pass it all the form props from this hook, which we created right here. So we're going to do that by simply spreading the hook inside. So I'm going to write ... form like that, and no more errors. Perfect. Now inside, I'm going to write a native HTML form element like this. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give it an onSubmit function to be form.handleSubmit. And inside, we're going to pass our custom onSubmit function, so we have access to these values here, and then we can send them to the server or do something else with them. So inside of your handle submit, just pass in the onSubmit like this. Great. And inside, give it a class name of space -y-8. So all of the elements inside of this form are going to be equally spaced on the y-axis, right? So one below another are going to have equal space. Great. And margin top of 8. So it's separated from the title and description, which we've written here. Great. Now let's go ahead and let's add the form field. So I'm going to write form field like this. And form field is going to be a self-closing tag. So let's go ahead and give it a property of control, form.control like this. And let's go ahead and give it a name of title like that. And let's give it a render. So in this render, go ahead and immediately destructure the field. And let's go ahead and immediately return a form item like this. Great. So let's check whether we have this imported. It looks like we don't. I forgot to import that. So make sure you also import the form item from s/components UI form. And now, whoops, I accidentally opened the types. And now you're not going to have those errors. Great. Now let's add the form label, which is simply going to be course title like this. And below this, let's add the form control like this, which is going to store our input, which is a self-closing tag. So let's give it a disabled prop of is submitting. And let's go ahead and let's give it a placeholder of e.g. And let's use single quotes advanced web development like this. There we go. And let's also spread all the field inside. So what did we do by spreading the field? Well, you can take a look inside of this field here, and you can take a look inside of the t field values. Let's try and find them. All right, I cannot find them right now, but basically what we are doing here, there we go. So we are passing the onChange, onBlur, disabled, value, name, and ref, right? So by spreading this simple thing in one line, we are replacing it from manually writing onChange and onBlur and all that stuff, right? So we're just passing the field spread like this. Great. Now below this, let's go ahead and let's add a form description, right? So go outside of form control and write form description like this, which you should have imported from a UI components form. And let's add, what will you teach in this course? Like this. Great. And below the description, let's add form message, which is a self-closing tag, which is going to display errors if there are any. Great. Now let's go ahead and let's go outside of this form item, but still inside of the form. And let's add a new div and give it a class name of flex items-center and gap-x-2 like this. And inside, let's go ahead and let's add a link element from next/link. So make sure you import the link from next/link, and I'm just going to move it to the top like this. Great. And let's go ahead and give this link an href of / like this. And let's add a button inside, which is just going to say cancel like this. And let's give it a variant of ghost, and very important, give it a type of button, otherwise it's going to be used to submit the form, and we don't want that. And just below this link element, go ahead and add another button element, and this one is going to say continue like this. This is going to be a type of submit, so once user clicks on this, we're going to submit the form, but we're going to add a disabled prop to it if it's not valid. So if the form is not valid, or if the form is submitting, in that case, we're going to disable this form. So you can see now when it types something, it's enabled. And what should happen now when I open the console and click continue, I should see that in my values right here. There we go, because we wrote that inside of our onSubmit function to only console log these values. Great. So what we have to do next is we have to change this onSubmit function to actually send a request to our API. So let's go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to change this onSubmit function to an asynchronous onSubmit function. I'm going to go ahead and open a try and catch block. You actually don't need to do anything with the error here. And for now, let's just go ahead and write console log something went wrong. We're going to change that to a toast later. And now let's write const response to be await Axios, which we have imported, .post /API/course. And let's pass in the values as the body. And then we're going to use router.push. Whoops, we didn't add the router. So let's go above the form hook. And let's just write const router to be use router, which we should have imported from next. Oops, my mistake. So not next/router, it should be next/navigation, right? So always check for that. Otherwise, it would not work. Great. So after we get the response from this Axios call, we're going to get redirected to that course edit page. So I'm going to write router.push like this. I'm going to use backticks /teacher/courses/ and I'm gonna use response.data.id like this. Perfect. So now if you try, and let me open my console tab here. And now if you try and write test and click here, you're gonna get something went wrong. That's because we have a 404, because we never created that API route. But before we do that, one thing I want to do is add our toast element instead of console logs here, right? So let's go ahead and let's go inside of our terminal so we can install a new package. So I'm going to go ahead and write npm install react-hot-toast like this. Let's wait a second for this to install. And then you can run your app again. Make sure to refresh your localhost. And let's go ahead and let's go inside of our components folder and go ahead and create a new folder called providers. And inside create a toaster-provider.tsx like this. Mark this as use client and write export const toast provider like this. And very simply, it's just going to return a toaster from React hot toast. So let's go ahead and import toaster from react-hot-toast like this. And let's actually destructure it like this. There we go. So it needs to be destructured. So import destructured toaster from react-hot-toast and just return it. As simple as that. And make sure you have use client. That's very important. And now let's go inside of our app folder, inside of the root layout right here where we have the metadata, our font and stuff. And let's go ahead inside of the body here like that. And let's just go ahead and add toaster like this, but not from react-hot-toast. We're going to use the toast provider, my apologies, like this. So toast provider, and make sure you have imported that from /components provider toaster-provider like that. And what you can do now is you can go back inside of your dashboard, routes, teacher, courses, create pages.tsx, and instead of console log, you can now use the toast. So I'm going to use toast from react-hot-toast.error. Something went wrong like this. And let me show you where I imported this toast. So right here, import toast from react-hot-toast like this. And let's move that to the top. And now if you try, you can see that we have a much more graceful error here. There we go. Something went wrong. Perfect. So in the next part, we have to create an API which is going to handle this. But in order to do that, we're going to have to set up our Prisma and our course model. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's go ahead and let's create our schema for the database. In order to do that, first thing we have to do actually is we have to install a couple of packages here. So let's go ahead and let's close everything and let's go inside of our terminal here. So I'm going to shut down the app and I recommend you do the same. And let's first install Prisma. So npm install -D Prisma like this. Once this is done, we're going to go ahead and run a command which is going to initialize Prisma inside of our project. So let's go ahead and write npx Prisma init like this. There we go. So now what you're going to notice is that we have a couple of new files here. So I'm going to close everything. And now we have the Prisma folder right here. And inside we have schema.prisma. One more thing that you're going to notice is if you visit your .environment file, after our clerk environment variables, we now have this big comment and a database URL. So what we have to do now is we have to change this database URL with our actual URL because this will not work. This is just a dummy URL. So for my database, I'm going to use MySQL and I'm going to use PlanetScale. You don't have to do this exactly as I am. So it doesn't matter. All you have to do is get this database URL. And it would be good if you found it for MySQL. So there's a bunch of free solutions like spinning up your own MySQL locally using Docker, or you can just Google free MySQL instance. You can also visit my Discord where a couple of people have found some free solutions, but PlanetScale is by far the fastest solution, but it does require a credit card. So let's go ahead and click on start with an empty database, right? I don't know what your view will be, but maybe you're gonna immediately see something like this, maybe. So let's go ahead and give our database a name. So I'm gonna use it LMS like this. And make sure you select the free hobby option. So if this is your first time using PlanetScale, or if you have never created databases here, you always have one free database, right? So you can always remove your old one and start with this one if you're just using it for a tutorial. Great, so we have a free database here. And you have to click create a database. If your button is disabled, it means you have not added your credit card. So the reason they require a credit card is to prevent fraud and free tier abuse. So just make sure you select the free option here and make sure this says free as well. And then you can click create a database. So what we have to do now is we have to select Prisma because that's what we're using. So select Prisma right here, and then you're gonna have to create your password. So just click create password. You don't have to change anything inside of this input like this. There we go. Now that you have this, you can copy this too and save it somewhere. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and just copy this database URL. So go ahead and find this and click copy like this. And replace the database URL like this. There we go. You can see how now it starts with MySQL right here. And this is my password and all the other stuff. Great. So now that we have that, we have to modify our schema Prisma. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, and I'm going to go inside of my schema.prisma. I'm going to select everything and I'm going to paste it. So you can copy it from here, or you can just find it in the PlanetScale and copy it from there. So if you're using MySQL with some other solution, which is not PlanetScale, just make sure that you add relation mode Prisma right here. Make sure it matches my schema Prisma. So most important is that the provider is MySQL and that relation mode is Prisma like this. Great. And after you've done that, you're pretty much done. So you can go ahead and look at some instructions here if you want to learn more about how it works. But I'm going to stop here. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a util which is going to enable us to access the database using Prisma. So let's go ahead and close everything. Let's go inside of our lib folder and create a new file, db.ts, like this. Let's go ahead and, well, we cannot write anything here. First, we have to install a package called Prisma Client. So let's go ahead and write npm install add prisma/client like this. And let's wait a second for this to install. Great. After this has been installed, you don't have to run the project yet, but you can already import Prisma Client like this from prisma/client like this. And let's go ahead and let's export const db to be global this.prisma pipe new Prisma client like this. And then let's just write if process.environment.node environment is not production. In that case, assign the db to global this. So global this.prisma is equal to db like that. And as you can see, now we have some errors because Prisma doesn't exist inside of the global this element. So let's use declare to add it there. So declare global var Prisma is equal to Prisma client, pipe undefined. Like this. And there we go. The errors are now gone. So why are we doing this? Why are we not just doing export const db new Prisma client like this, right? This should work. Ignore this for now. Like imagine if we just did this. So this should technically work, right? And yeah, it's correct. It would work. But the problem is it would cause issues in development because we have something called hot reload, which means that every time we save a file, a new Prisma client instance would be created. And that would easily overflow your project and it's going to crash in development, of course. But in production, it actually works exactly like this. Take a look at this code, right? So we have a constant called db. And what we do is we look for global this.prisma. If we don't have global this.prisma, in that case, we use new Prisma client, right? And then we have an if clause here, which checks if we are not in production. So if we are in staging or locally or development, in that case, we're going to use global this.prisma to assign the DB. Why are we using global this.prisma and how does that help with preventing the overflow error, which I just warned you about? Well, that is because global this is not affected by hot reload. So by appending the Prisma client to global this, we have did a little trick to save us from crashing our project in development. Great, so make sure you have this little util. And now we're ready to create our API route. Well, actually we are not. We first have to create our models, right? So let's do that first. My apologies. So go inside of your Prisma folder, inside of schema.prisma right here. And let's go ahead and let's create a model course like this. Let's give it an ID of string ID and add default to be UUID like this. And before I go any further, if your schema.prisma file doesn't have these pretty colors like mine has and this clear syntax which separates string from an ID and strings from a variant, right? Well, what you can do is you can install an extension called Prisma. So just make sure you have that. Great. So we added the ID. We're also going to need a user ID, which is going to come from clerk, and it's just a string. We're going to have a title, which is a string, and db.text like this. We're going to have description, which is a string, and db.text as well. Image URL, which is also going to be an optional string like this, and db.text like that. Price, which is going to be an optional float, is published, which is going to be a Boolean with the default value of false, like this. And we're also going to have the category ID, which is an optional string, and a relation to the category. So I'm going to leave the space for that now. So we're going to go back to this in a moment, but I just want to finish the other stuff. So let's also add the attachments. Oh, my apologies. Yes, we can add attachments, which is just going to be attachment and an array. So we're going to have an error here because we don't have this model defined, but we're going to do that in a second. And let's also add created at to be a datetime at default now. And let's also add updated at to be datetime at updated at, like this. So first things first, I think I have a typo here. So category, that's not correct. It should be category ID, like this. So make sure you don't have the typo here. And now let's quickly just fix this attachment thing right here. So what we have to do is we have to create an attachment model, which is going to be relating to this model course. So let's go ahead and let's write model attachment like this. It's going to have an ID, which is a string type of ID, and a default value of UUID, like this. It's going to have a name, which is a string, and a URL, which is a string, and db.text, like this. Now we have to create a back relation to this course. You can see we still have an error here. So we do that by adding course ID, which is a string, and course to be a relation with a course model. Make sure you don't misspell it. And add at relation fields course ID, like this, references ID, and on delete cascade, like this. And you can see we no longer have this error here, but now we have a warning here. And we can easily fix that by adding at index course ID, like this. Great. And above that, let's also add created at datetime at default now, and updated at to be datetime at updated at, like this. Great. So let me just expand this if I can, or I can just zoom out so you can see this in one line. So course is a course model relation fields course ID right here, which is referencing the ID field of the course, which is right here. And the on delete cascade means that once the course has been deleted, all the attachments will be deleted as well, which have a relation to that course ID. Great. And now we can go back here and let's go ahead and let's create our category model. So what we have to do is just below the attachment, or actually above it, right? So model category, like this, is going to have an ID, which is a string at ID at default UUID, like this. Name is going to be a string and unique, like this. Sorry, did not execute it. And courses is going to be course, like this. So so category can have many courses inside of it, right? But a course can only have one category. So go inside of the course right here and go ahead and add a relation to the category. So category is category, which is an optional relation. Fields category ID, like this, references ID, like that. And what we have to do now is just add an index here. So add index category ID, like this. Great. And now you can see that we no longer have errors in the category either. Perfect. So our course is still not finished as a model, but later on we're going to define some chapters and other stuff, but it's not important for now. For now, what we want to do is just a simple creation of this model. So you might be wondering, why is description optional? Why is the image optional? Price and category, why are all of those things optional? Well, the reason they are optional is because they are not required for creating the course, right? We are not going to enable publishing the course if we don't have a price, image, URL, and description. There might even be a way to do this with Prisma, but I'm going to do it manually using the API logic, right? So only the title is required to create a course, but everything else it's completely fine if we don't have it, because when you create a new course, so when we enter this title here and when we click continue, it's not gonna immediately publish that course, right? It's just gonna be a draft. And then when we add description and image and price and mark published as true, only then it's gonna be visible to the students. Great, so it created a very good start to our Prisma schema. And what we have to do now is we have to create an API route, which is going to, use all of this information. But before we do that, one important thing you have to do every time you play around in schema.prisma, you have to go inside of your terminal, you have to shut down your application, and you have to write npx prisma generate. That is one of the two commands that we need. So what generate did is it added these models to our util right here, which we created in the lib folder, right? So now when we import this db and try to access it, so let's try, can I use it, db dot, let's see, course, there we go. You can see that now it auto-completes my course, right? Because it knows it's inside of my schema Prisma, right? And same thing is true for attachment. You can see how it auto-completes, right? If we didn't run npx prisma generate, that would not work. And the other thing we have to do is we have to run npx prisma db push. So the first command was to add it locally, but the second command is to push it to PlanetScale or whatever database URL you put in the environment file. So if you get any errors here, that is because your environment variable